holiday season is a time for giving. So today we give you early ADP presents. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Thursday, December 19th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and Chris Towers. Today on the show, we have ADP presents. What does that mean? 12 undervalued players based on NFBC ADP in the month of December. We also have lots of news to catch you up on. We had some pre-recorded content that came out. But since then, Cody Bellinger got traded to the Yankees, Jeffrey Springs traded to the A's, and much more. Let's start with the news, get that out of the way, and then we can focus on our gift giving here for the holidays. But beginning with Cody Bellinger, who, no secret, we figured this was going to happen eventually, traded over to the Yankees for Cody Poteet, essentially a salary dump by the Chicago Cubs. Bellinger is 29 years old, coming off an okay season, not nearly as good as his first with the Chicago Cubs. He hit 266, 18 home runs, 9 steals, a 751 OPS. Chris, you cannot ask for a better, I guess, situation. Park upgrade for Cody Bellinger with that short porch in right field. And I would expect him to bat somewhere in the middle of the Yankees lineup.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be too surprised if he was right there at the top. He's like not a great OBP guy, but they might be okay with him setting the table. But either way, whether it's, second or fourth or whatever it ends up being, I think it's about as good of a landing spot as you could hope for a left-handed hitter who, when he's going well, pulls the ball well and doesn't have great raw power at this point in his career. And I think you have to be happy that this is pretty much the best case scenario for Cody Bellinger's fantasy value. So I moved him up a little bit. He is 101 in my Roto rankings. I moved him ahead of Bryan Reynolds at the outfield position. I moved him ahead of Tristan Casas and Christian Walker at first base. We'll see where Walker ends up. That could obviously change things, but yeah, that's I think you have to be pretty happy about it if you're a Cody Bellinger believer.
Mm-hmm.
This is feeling like everything in its proper place kind of off season, because we just had Isaac Paredes with his extreme tendency to pull the ball down the left field line, go to Houston with the Crawford boxes, and just the ideal scenario to help his power play up. And it's kind of the same thing here with Cody Bellinger. It's not as extreme of a situation because there are a few players whose spray angles are as extreme as Isaac Paredes, but Bellinger, left-handed hitter, good at elevating, good at pulling the ball in the air. It wouldn't be at all a surprise if he leaned into those tendencies even more to take advantage of that short porch in right field. And this is a guy whose natural power has been on the decline. He managed to succeed in spite of it in 2023 with Chicago, had a impactful year in fantasy. But there was a lot of skepticism surrounding it because those exit velocity readings didn't look good. Well, they were basically exactly the same last year, and yet the production fell off. I think this move to Yankee Stadium represents Bellinger's best chance of being a high impact fantasy hitter again. Doesn't mean he will be, or he probably will be, but it's his best chance. This is one of the best scenarios he could have wound up in.
Yeah. Hopefully he runs a little more too, because obviously going from, 20 steals in 130 games in 2023, just 9 last year. He dealt with some injuries, a fractured rib and a fractured finger, I believe, last year. So, maybe those slowed him down a little bit, but yeah, I think if Bellinger, I feel pretty comfortable projecting 25-ish homers for him playing half his games at Yankee Stadium. The profile looks a lot better if it's 25 homers, 20 steals rather than 10 steals. But, I think the counting stats get a boost. It's everything you could hope for. He, in X home runs, Yankee Stadium would have been the third best park for Cody Bellinger last year behind Philadelphia and Cincinnati. So I think that's a very good thing.
Yep. And Cody Bellinger had 18 total home runs last season. He would have had 24 if he played all of his games in Yankee Stadium. 15 of his 18 home runs also went to the pull side. So again, it feels like a match made in heaven for Cody Bellinger's swing. Hope that he does run a little bit more. The Yankees, not really that aggressive. They were 24th in steals as a team. The Chicago Cubs were all the way up at 8th. But we have seen when they have someone who's capable of running, they let that guy go. Like Jazz Chisholm just ran as much as he wanted.
Well, and the Cubs, it was weird because like they didn't run at all in the first half of the season, if you remember. Like just as a team, nobody ran. It was the weirdest thing. Nico Horner had like 7 steals in the first half or something. And then they all started running in the second half. By that point, I think Cody Bellinger was pretty beat up, having come back from a couple of different injuries. So maybe he would have stolen more if he had been in better health. That's the hope anyway.
The NFBC ADP in December, 45 drafts, so not an insignificant sample size, is 124 for Cody Bellinger. He's the 12th first baseman off the board, the 28th outfielder. Chris, you already answered this. You're moving him up a little bit. Scott, how about for you? Do you plan to move Bellinger ahead of Christian Walker, Tristan Casas, Spencer Steer, Vinny Pasquantino, or even in the outfield, Riley Green, Christian Yelich, names like that?
I see the argument for it. And certainly if you're projecting more steals, I think it's an easier case to make. I'm going to be a little more restrained, I think. For me, it's more before Cody Bellinger as my 12th first baseman, I would have not felt excited to take him there, and now I would.
Sure.
Fair enough.
I do have him behind Christian Yelich and Riley Green, but I think I just have them ahead of ADP.
Yep. On the Cubs side of things, this obviously clears up another roster spot. They have Ian Happ, Pete Crow Armstrong, and Kyle Tucker projected in the outfield with Seiya Suzuki at DH and Michael Busch at first base. Third base is wide open. And Chris, we talked about this when we did the emergency podcast for the Kyle Tucker trade. Matt Shaw has an opportunity here where if he plays well in spring, he could be, their opening day third baseman. It sounds like that's what they want to happen as well. There have been 4 NFBC drafts since last Saturday. So after the Tucker trade is done, Matt Shaw's ADP is 245 in those 4 drafts. Scott, what do you think about that price tag for Matt Shaw?
It sounds reasonable. This is somebody who I'm expecting to wind up on the opening day roster now. I know he officially has to earn the job, but it sounds like he's going to get that opportunity. And his minor league career, other than a slow start this past year, it's been pretty good. Pretty much doing everything you would want Matt Shaw to do. So I think he's going to be a top 5 prospect for me overall heading into the season. And to get him just inside the top 250 with a job lined up, theoretically, I think that would be an exciting development. Now, I'm going to guess he rises more from here and maybe to an uncomfortable range. But right now, I'd be happy with where Matt Shaw is going.
I will say, I think there's still a trade left because I think Seiya Suzuki's agent basically came out and said he wasn't happy when he got moved to DH at the end of last season. He doesn't want to be a DH. And right now, Seiya Suzuki's a DH. And I don't really know what permutation you can get to where he's playing in the field regularly, right? Like Kyle Tucker's going to be the right fielder. Ian Happ has won, I think, 3 Gold Gloves in a row at left field, something like that. He's won 3 Gold Gloves overall in left field. Pete Crow Armstrong might be the best defensive center fielder in baseball when it's all said and done. And Owen Casey, Alexander Canario, and Alcantara.
Calvin Alcantara.
Calvin Alcantara. Like, there's a lot of outfield depth. So whether it's trading one of those guys in AAA, Casey or Alcantara, or another, a say Suzuki trade, which would be a more significant one. He was their best hitter last year. I do think the Cubs probably
repeat that last sentence because you kind of cut
Cubs
off.
Probably aren't done yet.
Yeah. So hopefully they don't trade for a third baseman, but I guess that is a possibility for the Chicago Cubs and a fair there.
They could move Horner, which is something that's been rumored a little bit, in which case Shaw could play second base as well. So there are multiple avenues still.
Before we hit our first break, just a reminder to subscribe to the FBT newsletter if you haven't already. If you're watching on YouTube, scan that QR code. That will take you right to the website where you click on the FBT logo, you punch in your email address, and it's easy as that. And a programming update for the next 2 weeks. The podcast will publish on Monday and Thursday instead of Tuesday and Thursday. We don't want podcasts coming out on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, so you'll get an extra day to listen to FBT content. Let's take a break. When we return, Jeffrey Springs to the A's. We'll talk about that right after this.
Baby, we are gonna start a fire.
From world-renowned clubs
simply devastating
to worldwide stars.
Wrexham have done it. This incredible ride continues.
The English Football League on CBS Sports Network and stream every match live on Paramount Plus.
Welcome back in. The A's acquired Jeffrey Springs and Jacob Lopez from the Tampa Bay Rays in exchange for Joe Boyle, Jacob Waters, and Will Simpson, as well as a compensatory draft pick. Poor Jeffrey Springs, man. He's traded from one minor league park to another. It does not get much worse than that. But Springs returned from Tommy John surgery last season. He made 7 starts, 3.27 ERA, 136 WHIP, 10K per 9. Swinging strike rate still really, really good. But the fastball velocity was down almost 2 miles per hour, and he's someone who already doesn't throw very hard. And his season ended with left elbow fatigue. So, Scott, I don't know, last time we saw Jeffrey Springs for a full season, he was really, really good. I don't know if he'll get back to that level. There are some question marks here. What do you think about him going over to the Athletics?
I think what the first thought I have with this move is, I wonder if the Rays view Jeffrey Springs as damaged goods, because it seems weird, a pitcher, what seemed like a surefire member of your starting rotation going from an expected contender, to a non-contender. And it's not like they did the typical Rays thing where they got some exciting prospects in return. Yeah. It's a pretty light package.
It's like a 36th overall pick, I think, the compensatory pick, something like that. So
yeah,
it's not nothing.
It's not nothing, but I was underwhelmed by the return, and that the A's were the team acquiring him also raised alarm for me. And you lay out the injury history there, coming back from Tommy John surgery last year. The numbers were fine, but the velocity was down 2 miles per hour, and then he had the elbow fatigue to end the season. So I don't know. I wasn't especially high on Springs anyway, just because it's a loaded pitcher crop this year, and I can find more reasons to be concerned about him than some of the others who have interesting potential. But I think even less so now, before you even get into the change in supporting cast, which is presumably a downgrade.
Yeah, Springs' NFBC ADP in December is 244.5. Would you guys rather have Jeffrey Springs or Ronel Blanco?
I'd rather have Springs.
I am going to consult my rankings.
Yeah, I mean, let me make sure. I said that very confidently.
I have Blanco about a round ahead of Springs. So Blanco.
Okay. What about Jeffrey Springs versus Gavin Williams?
I think it's Springs. Yeah.
I think so too. I'm
all right.
Kind of bearish on Gavin Williams at the moment.
The one thing I will say about this trade is, one, it's $10.5 million, which is a perfectly reasonable amount of money for a team to spend on a Jeffrey Springs type starter. But obviously the Rays aren't going to spend $10.5 million on anything but a sure thing. And they had 6 starters,
seven.
6.
If you count Drew Rasmussen, 7.
Oh, Rasmussen. Okay, that's the other. Yeah, because McClanahan, Taj Bradley, Ryan Pepio, Zach Littell, and Shane Baz. It wasn't clear Jeffrey Springs was going to be in the rotation to start the season anyway. So I get it from that perspective. I guess it's I don't know. It doesn't really change how I view Springs for 2025. I think there's some upside there, but the chances of him hitting it seem pretty slim.
Did just want to mention one of the players in the return, Joe Boyle, who is a mammoth, 6'7". He throws really hard. He's got nasty stuff, generates whiffs, has absolutely no idea where the ball is going once it leaves his hands. So we've seen Tampa Bay, take on reclamation projects like this and get the control on track. It's not necessarily going to happen with Boyle, but if it does, maybe he becomes a back-end starter or a bulk reliever or, a high leverage arm. So he's interesting in that he could maybe one day have fantasy value. So
the stuff is really good. And if he can just be like, on the scouting scale, a 40 command guy, which is well below average, he could be a very good closer.
Yeah.
It's just, he might be a 25 on the 20 to 80 scale. Like he's got about as bad a command as you can have and still make the major.
Let's move on to the Orioles, who signed Japanese pitcher Tomoyuki Sugano, and they did that to a 1-year, $13 million deal. Sugano is 35 years old, coming off an incredible season in Japan, 167 ERA, .95 whip, but only 111 strikeouts over 156 and 2/3 innings. It looks like a control pitcher, mix and match. He's got 6 different pitches that he throws. Chris, I know you sent out a newsletter either earlier in this week or last week.
Yeah, last week.
Players coming over from Japan and Korea. What did you find on Tomoyuki Sugano?
He is the very standard crafty veteran. But it's worth noting he's a 3-time Central League MVP in Japan, and including 2024 after a couple of down years where, he had some elbow issues. He's been a 8-time All-Star, won the pitching Triple Crown back in 2018. I believe he's won their version of the Cy Young a couple of times as well. So about as decorated as they come. And, the fastball is, I think he averaged 91.9 with it last year, according to what I saw. It's not going to get not going to get whiffs with it. He had a 10% whiff rate last season. His strikeout rate overall was about average for Nippon. Cutter and slider both seem fine. The splitter, as you often see with Japanese pitchers, is the best swing and miss pitch there. And, whether it's throwing the splitter a little more, throwing the slider to get more whiffs, I'm not going to write off the potential that he could be at least an average strikeout pitcher at Major League Baseball. But the thing is, if Joe Boyle's a 25 on the 20 to 80 scale for command, Sugano might be the top end of the spectrum. He has absolutely elite command and control. And I think you can see a Seth Lugo, Chris Bassett, not 2024 Chris Bassett, obviously, but the good version of Chris Bassett. He throws 6 pitches. He's also got a sinker. So I can see him kitchen sinking his way to a very good season, but I think the upside's probably not that high. I'll say he should be drafted in a 15-team league, certainly, and even a 12-team roto leagues. I think he can be a late round pick, but it's hard to see, a ton of upside there. He is also, I think, 35 on opening day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I in the off-season tracker for Tomoyuki Sugano, I said we're probably hoping for a Michael Wacha type outcome here, where not going to generate much enthusiasm or a big strikeout rate, but in the end could be a very usable fantasy pitcher.
Mm-hmm. The Orioles updated rotation, by the way: Zach Eflin, Grayson Rodriguez, Dean Kramer, Tomoyuki Sugano, and Cade Povich. They still need somebody at the top. I don't think they're going to sign one of these big name free agents, but they've been linked to Luis Castillo, Dylan Cease. So maybe there still is a trade to come for the Orioles.
I think Baseball Prospectus, I think I've seen on a couple of different pieces that they've done something like is Dean Kramer still slated to start in a playoff series for them? And that's their marker of whether the Orioles have a good enough rotation or not. And currently, it looks like Dean Kramer's probably their number 3 starter. That's not good enough for a contender.
No,
you can't go into the season with that rotation and expect to truly contend for a World Series. This is a team that, after the Corbin Burns trade, they still needed another pitcher. Now they lost Corbin Burns. So I think they clearly need to make a big splash. Whether they will or not, I sure hope so.
Scotty, your Atlanta Braves signed Bryan De La Cruz to a 1-year non-guaranteed contract. He has 19 plus home runs 2 years in a row, but took a nosedive after getting traded to the Pirates last season. Seems like a Ronald Acuna fill-in replacement until he's ready to go. And then after that, maybe he's a platoon bat with Kelenic. If he hits well early on, maybe he just takes Kelenic's job. Is there any deep league interest in Bryan De La Cruz?
I mean, depends how deep the league is. So he should probably be drafted in only leagues, but I am seeing this as he's competing, so not even guaranteed. It's a non-guaranteed contract, competing to probably be the lesser half of a platoon with Kelenic. Kind of a bench piece. Could he play his way into more time? I suppose it's possible. We've noted in past years that he has some interesting underlying data, but really poor on base skills, which give him longer odds. The fact he's a right-handed hitter give him longer odds. He wasn't good enough to play for the Pirates every day down the stretch last year, so that's not a good sign.
The Cubs signed Carson Kelly to a 2-year, $11.5 million deal, and in 91 games last season, hit .238 with 9 home runs and a .687 OPS. Don't think he really has any fantasy value, but he's going to do just enough to take away playing time from Miguel Amaya. I think they'll split evenly, so my guess is neither of them have value in 2-catcher leagues.
Amaya becomes a part-time catcher.
There you go.
Someone out there will get that reference. Someone out there with kids will get that reference.
I don't. Garrett Crochet is not planning to change his pitch mix following his trade to Boston. Shane McClanahan.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Is expected to throw 150-ish innings next season, and he's returning from his second Tommy John surgery. The ADP in December is 115, just after Tyler Glasnow and Sonny Gray, just ahead of Zach Gallen and Carlos Rodon. Does that sound like the right range for McClanahan, knowing you're going to get 150-ish innings?
Well, you don't know that. That's the best case scenario.
The ceiling.
The expectation.
Yeah. Has he done that once before, right? 150 innings?
Sounds right.
In the majors, yes. I don't know if he got there in the minors before.
This seems too optimistic for me. Just the fact, before you factor in the innings ceiling of 150 innings, which we presumed he would have an innings ceiling of about that already, just the fact he's coming back from a second Tommy John surgery. I have Shane McClanahan closer to like 40th in my starting pitcher rankings. Now, if he's lighting it up in spring training, I'll adjust. That goes without saying, but no, I would to see him in the same vicinity as Tyler Glasnow seems kind of wild to me.
Yeah, because Glasnow probably has a similar ceiling in terms of innings. He's a much safer bet to be good
on a per inning basis.
Yeah, like I think it's an open question that Shane McClanahan will be good next season. I sure hope so, but it's not at all a sure thing.
Yeah, the track record of having 2 Tommy John surgeries is kind of a coin flip at this point. We've seen a success story in Nathan Eovaldi that has played out very well. We just saw Walker Buehler have an abysmal season coming back from his second TJ. So, it does seem pretty up in the air right now for my guy Shane O'Mac. Clay Holmes said he wants to throw 160-plus innings in 2025. Holmes is transitioning from reliever to starter and hasn't thrown more than 70 innings in a season since 2018. So I will personally take the under on 160 there. Nolan Arenado used his...
I mean, Michael King, I think, had clear durability concerns and managed to exceed that. I'm pretty excited about this move for Clay Holmes. I think it's a better role for him than closing. And we're about to get into these gifts, draft day gifts, presents. I think he fits the bill because his ADP right now is 337, and I think I have about 100 spots higher than that. I think as a sinker baller who's always had a strong ERA in the bullpen, I think it'll work out pretty well.
If you are worried about gifts not being clear enough, using presence also doesn't really improve that. Both are audibly a little confusing.
Whenever I hear the phrase "grace you with your presence," I imagine people
There's a
bringing in
Kanye
a big pile of presents.
There's a Kanye lyric about that, I believe.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are giving you undervalued players that you should draft. And their gifts and their presents, whatever. Nolan Arenado used his no trade clause to block a trade to the Houston Astros. Reports cited Arenado's preference to not make a decision this early in the offseason. So I guess maybe hoping for a better situation to arise. Although,
what's the better situation? Like,
I don't know.
What does Nolan Arenado want? Like, I'm genuinely asking this question because, like, if he wanted to win, why sign the extension with the Rockies, right? And if you wanted to, like, just get your numbers, you kind of don't force your way out of Colorado. You're going to have better numbers there. I don't, like, if you want to burnish your reputation and increase your Hall of Fame chances and maybe get one more contract after this one, Houston is by far the best possible landing spot for him. So
that would have been another everything in its proper place kind of move.
I've been calling for this one for weeks. I hope it happens still, because it's just maybe Boston or Cincinnati, which I don't think either of those teams would want to do it. That clearly the best possible landing spot.
He's been linked to Boston, and that would be fine too. And I think I saw that he wanted to play on the East Coast. Don't quote me on that.
No, he had the Angels and Dodgers on his list of teams he'd be willing to get traded to, which is, Dodgers, fine. Angels,
yeah.
Her?
It's kind of weird. Chris, you said, "What does Nolan Arenado want?" And my mind instantly went to, "It's not that easy."
I don't know, man. Like, I think Houston, like, I think he's got 3 years left on his contract. Houston would be your best chance to, like, get to, he's at like 340 career home runs. Like, he's got a real chance to get to like 400 and like lock up I think he's probably a Hall of Famer no matter what, but like, he's not going to do a lot more if he doesn't play a lot better than he did last season the next few years. So it's, I don't understand the thought process here, man.
And last news item, we have Pirates GM Ben Cherington said Joey Bart will enter 2025 as the favorite to start at catcher. They also have Endy Rodriguez and Henry Davis. So kind of a crowded situation, but perhaps Joey Bart has the leg up there. ADP gifts, ADP presents, undervalued players. Based on NFBC ADP in December, 45 drafts have been completed. So again, it's a pretty good sample size. Many things will change once other ADP comes out from CBS and Yahoo and ESPN. But this is the data that we have right now. So we will each choose an undervalued target in the top 100, 101 to 200, 201 to 300, and then 300 plus. So 12 total undervalued players. Scott, feel free to grab one of those gifts behind you and just hand them out on the podcast while you deliver your favorites here.
Here's a nice one with a very
lovely
peculiar bow.
That's a unique bow. That is
yeah. It's a boomer bow. I don't know.
Well, speaking of that gift, who is your undervalued player inside the top 100 so far?
Yeah. Well, I could have picked any number of second basemen in this range. I have Jose Altuve is going 23 spots lower than I have him. Ozzy Albies is going 19 spots lower than I have him. Jordan Westberg is going 39 spots lower than I have him. Luis Garcia outside the top 100, but still 20 spots lower than I have him. And then you got Marcus Semien, who's going 87th on average, 44 spots after I have him. So part of it is just this particular group of drafters on NFBC are devaluing second baseman relative to me. And, there are those kind of like institutional kind of overarching trends that influence probably all of my picks for this exercise. Because I noticed as I was going through possibilities, hitters in general, like there were very few pitchers that I picked out as, oh, this seems like a good value.
It's easier to find pitcher values I don't like than pitcher values I love.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the weird thing is, one of the reasons why players tend to get undervalued at this point in the year in NFC drafts is injury risk. Mm-hmm. Marcus Semien, every player has injury risk. he's played about as much as anyone in baseball over the past decade. I don't know when the last time he missed more than 10 games in a season was.
Yeah.
So that's the weird one where like you would think that playing time and lack of injury risk would boost him in this. He hasn't missed more than 10 games since 2017.
Yeah. For me, it's okay. Ozzie Albies and Marcus Semien both seem like great values, but Albies is going 27 picks ahead of Semien, and that doesn't make sense because it seems like it's a close call. Yeah, Semien's production was disappointing by his standards last year, but so was Ozzie Albies for the time he was healthy. And you could say, okay, but Semien's 34, so probably his disappointment was decline related. But if you dig into the data looks very much like 2022 for him. So it's not like there was this new, this clear decline in skill for Marcus Semien that contributed to the decline in stats. And I think a lot of it just comes down to he ran a lot less. He stole 8 bases when we didn't notice the subpar exit velocities so much in 2022 because he stole 25 bases that year. And I think he could get that back. I think at a position as weak as second base, that I'm willing to take on what seems like a fairly small risk of Semien just continuing to decline as opposed to bouncing back to some degree.
Mm-hmm. And I think the steals could come back a little bit as well. He's still 81st percentile in sprint speed. And I know it's been a 3-year decline from 25 to 14 to 8. Bruce Bochy, under Bruce Bochy, the Rangers haven't run much. But Bruce Bochy was the manager in 2023 when he had 14 steals. So can he get back to that 15-ish range? Looking at the Steamer projections, 253, 25 home runs, 95 runs scored, 12 steals. I think that's a pretty fair projection. And it'll beat an ADP of 88 or 87, wherever he's going. So I agree completely with that. So.
And you could look at it from a position scarcity standpoint, too. It's leaving out catcher because it's kind of its own unique situation every year. Second base is clearly the weakest offensive position. And maybe in NFBC, where you're talking deep 15-team leagues, there just isn't much need to care about position scarcity because you're going to be thin somewhere. You go so deep into the player pool. But I think for the standard 12-team user, that's something you should account for in this too.
All right, Chris, over to you. An undervalued player inside the top 100.
It is reasonable. And so there, Scott mentioned a few of those, like institutional things that lead to players being undervalued. And I think right now there are kind of two things that I'm looking at that the fantasy industry as a whole is potentially undervalued. And I think it is players who don't steal bases or don't steal many bases, I think are being undervalued systematically right now, and utility only players. And it's worth keeping in mind the difference between a 12-team and a 15-team league. A lot of these drafts are 15-team leagues, but like there are going to be at least 4 absolute, no doubt about it, must start UT only players to open the season. And I think all of them except for Shohei Ohtani are really good values right now. Marcell Ozuna, Brent Rooker, and Kyle Schwarber, I think you make a case for all of them being undervalued. But the thing is, Rooker was the best of them, not counting Shohei Ohtani. And he's by far the most likely to not be util only pretty quickly. I'm not going to say it's guaranteed that he becomes outfield eligible early on, but he played most of last year with a forearm injury. He had surgery right after the season, and they've already said they expect him to play more outfield. He had the underlying numbers to back up much of what he did last year. I don't know if he should necessarily be a top 10 player again, but the underlying numbers suggest it was not a fluke. And he's getting what should be a pretty nice ballpark upgrade in the move from Oakland to San Francisco. So, Sacramento. So I think Brent Rooker, you could make a case for him as a top 40 player in 2025. I've got him 58th right now, and his ADP is what, 75?
74.4, yep.
Yeah, so I think that's an easy one. If you want to, it's a little frustrating going through your draft, taking utility only player early, and then getting to like the 12th round and by far the best player is a shortstop and you've already filled up your shortstop and middle infield positions, I get it. That can be a frustrating situation. Most of the drafts happening right now are drafting benches. So you can still draft those guys. Like it's when we do our little mock drafts, most of the time we don't draft benches, especially at this point in the year and especially in our roto league. So like there's no way around that if you take a utility only player in those drafts. And it's also true of the gladiator drafts on NFC. I get that. But
yeah,
in most of your drafts, if you have a bench spot, if the best player available doesn't have a spot in your lineup, just take them because you're not going to start the same team the whole year.
Well,
I think people overthink that.
It's easier to say for Rooker, especially because he's going to pick up outfield eligibility in short order. It sounds like so. It's Marcell Ozuna. You don't expect to ever take him out of that utility spot.
Like maybe he could get first base if Matt Olson gets hurt. That's basically the only way I could see it for Ozuna.
But I'll tell you to further your point. I last year in the very early mock drafts we were doing, I was getting Ozuna in every league. And then once we started drafting leagues that counted,
you backed off.
I started passing up him because I saw JD Martinez and Eloy Jimenez and Byron Buxton going later. And it's like, well, I don't want to miss out on my opportunity to draft one of them for my utility spot. And of course, the only one who was really worth starting all season and significantly outperformed his draft position was Marcell Ozuna.
Yeah.
I do want to address the unexpectedness of it all. This is a guy who is, by baseball standards, middle-aged, and he just had a huge breakout out of he was pretty good, I guess, in 2023.
Yeah, he was a must-start player in 2023.
And you say that underlying numbers totally back it up. I mean, he batted 293.
I didn't say totally,
mostly. He batted 293. Expected batting average was 266. He still struck out 29% of the time, which I think presents a lot of batting average risk. And I've been down this path before where you get the 30-year-old with the surprising breakout. Oh, the underlying numbers back it up. And then the next year, he just turns back into a pumpkin.
He could be Luke. But like, if all he does is turns back into the 2023 version of him, that's still a pretty useful player, right? He still had 30 plus homers. It should be a better lineup around him overall. So I get it. I think there is some downside risk, but
I have him 58th also. That's what you said.
Yes.
So we're at exactly the same spot.
I love when that happens, when we just haven't talked about it at all and we end up with the same exact spot.
Yeah. I had that as one of my points for Rooker too, where if he regresses to 2023, he finishes the 122nd overall player. His ADP right now is 75. Okay, you'd rather not lose 50 spots of value.
But that happens. Like that's a fairly normal outcome for a player in that range.
Yeah. So I'm with you guys. And in fact, the player for me, the undervalued player in the top 100 is Marcell Ozuna with an ADP of 69.8. So going just ahead of Brent Rooker. He has finished as a top 30 overall player in Roto and a top 30 hitter in head-to-head points 2 years in a row. In those 2 seasons, 39 plus home runs, 100 plus RBI, 900 plus OPS. Quality of contact was elite both years. Expected stats back everything up. And I understand he's had lots of inconsistency in his career. Maybe everything just falls apart at 34 years old. We've seen that happen before in Marcell Ozuna's career. But for a guy to have been this good 2 years in a row, going outside of the top 60 picks right now, entering a contract year, I'm going to do it. I'm not really going to think about it. So I think in a lot of drafts, if I see Ozuna outside the top 50 or top 60, I'm just going to pull the trigger. I know it kind of presents some weird roster construction, especially if you play in a deeper league. I totally understand that. But if you were someone that just believes in banking stats, let me bank the stats, Ozuna feels like that guy. So,
yeah. I agree.
Me too. He was on my long list that I narrowed down to one name.
We're all in agreement there.
He didn't make my list for the newsletter on Wednesday, but only because I made the case with Brent Rooker. But I think Ozuna and Schwarber are also both being undervalued. And I think, Giancarlo Stanton and Kyle Manzardo are extremely cheap. And I think I mostly view them as, at least when Stanton's healthy, starting caliber utility guys as well. So I think you could look at a case where half of a 12-team league is starting util only guy on opening day.
I was this close to choosing Manzardo as my player outside the top 300, but I figured I can't give out 2 utility players. That just felt a little bit too weird.
I
Honorable
almost went with him though.
And honorable mentions in the top 100. Just give me names if you guys have anyone, because we got to keep it moving.
Trey Turner at 25. That wasn't just a name.
Yordan Alvarez, if we're talking about players that early. Adley Rutschman, just because he's the number 3 catcher. I think there's no world in which I would take Yanner Diaz ahead of him. And talking about those, sorry, I know you said just names, but I want to mention one more thing. Those institutional factors that drive prices down. Anthony Santander is 97 coming off of a 40 homer season. It's just because he hasn't signed. And as soon as he signs, unless he signs, I don't know, with the Marlins or something, like he's going to jump 15 spots. It doesn't really ever make sense when these guys are this undervalued because they're unsigned. Like Anthony Santander is going to have a job next year, guys. Like he's not going to be unemployed.
Yeah. For me, Austin Riley at 31.8 and Logan Webb at 97.9. I don't think I want Logan Webb, but should he really go 12 to 15 picks after Aaron Nola and Luis Castillo? Also after Tanner Bybee?
He's number 76 for me overall. So yeah.
All right, let's take a quick break. And when we return, back into undervalued players right after this.
Welcome to JJ's.
I'll have a... Wait, there's no way I can get a burger?
No chance. But you can have the NFL on CBS streams live on Paramount+. Oh, hang on. There's a toy.
Happy holidays to all, and our gift to you, undervalued players based on early ADP. And we are getting into the 100 to 200 range. And Chris, we will start with you.
Sandy Alcantara, who is currently going 160.
Homer.
Sure.
Homer.
I famously overrate the Marlins. I think we can all agree. But no, look,
Stallions.
This is a guy who was, the last time we saw him healthy, was being drafted as a top 40 pitcher or top 40 overall player. He wasn't worth that the last time we saw him healthy in 2023. But I think the thing to keep in mind about the way that season went was he wasn't great early on. He was basically exactly what everyone hoped he would be from the start of July on. It was a low 3 ERA. It was a very good whip. We know wins are probably going to be tough to come by for the Marlins, but this is one guy coming back from Tommy John surgery. I don't really expect to be limited or babied at all. I think if he's healthy, they're going to let it rip, and Sandy Alcantara should go back to being a 180 inning guy with, you know, decent but not great strikeouts. Like the overall package, I get it. He's not an ace, probably. We've seen ace upside from Sandy Alcantara, though. Like nobody can deny that. And I think he's a pretty good bet for like a mid 3 ERA and production that honestly won't be that dissimilar from Logan Webb, who you mentioned might be undervalued, but is still going, 50 spots ahead of him. So I think Alcantara is weirdly being overlooked right now.
Some names going just ahead of him: Sandy versus Ryan Pepio. Who would you rather have?
I think it depends on what your approach is with your pitching staff and what you need, because I think Pepio probably has more per inning upside as a strikeout pitcher, but I would take Alcantara.
What about Sandy versus Robbie Ray?
Again, Sandy.
Yeah, I have Sandy ahead of those guys too, though my overall ranking isn't so different from ADP. Like, obviously, he's not going to give you the big workload coming back from Tommy John.
You're not going to get the 220 inning workload.
He was complete game machine, and that drove a lot of his value, but it's not like you have to draft him like he's the top 10 pitcher anyway, either, clearly.
All right, Scott, over to you in undervalued player in the 100 to 200 range.
So we've talked about this one before, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
Bo Bichette was the obvious standout here. He's going 144th on average, 72 spots lower than I have him. I am exactly twice as high as the consensus on Bo Bichette. And I think it's as simple as people are taking his numbers last year at face value. It was a really bad year. But a guy who, through the first 5 years of his minor league career hit 299. I don't think the 225 batting average when he was dealing with, I believe it was a hamstring injury that just wouldn't let up.
Calf
Injury. Okay. Yeah, it was just a lost season for Bo Bichette. He's still in his prime. He has that one blemish on the track record now, at least in the batting average department. I've in previous years, I was kind of a downer on Bichette because I thought people were expecting too much from him power wise and certainly speed wise. He hasn't been a plus base stealer in several years now, but I expect him to hit at least 290 with 20 plus homers. And so to me, that's pretty easily a top 100 player. And yet he's going closer to 150 behind Anthony Volpe, behind
might
Adolis.
Just be a stolen base guy.
Right. Bichette might hit twice as many home runs as him and have 60 points of batting average on Volpe. He's going behind Adolis Garcia, who also is coming off a down season, and I think
be done.
I think there's a lot more reason to believe Adolis Garcia is done than Bichette, considering again Bichette is 20.
The thing with Bichette
next year,
how many players are, like you said, 299 hitters with, I mean, you look at the per 162 game averages because he only played 3 full seasons before in his first 5. One of them was COVID. One was when he got called up. But from age 21 to 25, 299, averaged 102 runs, 27 homers, 96 RBI, 16 steals per 162 games. How many guys do that from age 21 to 25 and are just done being good players at 20?
The hit tool being that good specifically, because you'll find guys who had a big power numbers to start their career and then fell off quickly, but not ones who could just were this good at hitting all around.
Yeah, it clearly undervalued. I have him 70 spots ahead of his ADP as well.
I think the downside here is that his right leg is just shot. So last year he dealt with a recurring right calf strain. He's had lots of issues with the knee, his right knee. He's been on the IL twice because of that. He went on the IL once because of a right quad strain. So there's clearly been something going on with his right leg. He's had an entire offseason to get right. He's entering a contract year at 27 years old. I am closer to you guys in believing that he is an undervalued player. And the biggest note of all, he cut his hair. Remember when Vlad Jr. cut his hair last season? What happened?
It's a whole team philosophy. Though, man, that long hair looks so good on Bo Bichette.
It did.
It makes me sad.
He is no longer Flo Bichette.
Remember when Jacob deGrom had the long hair and it was just this nasty mess of hair on his head? Like Bo Bichette looked suave.
It looked
with
good,
it,
yeah.
You know, the Blue Jays know Bo Bichette better than any other team, one would assume. And they came out very early in the offseason and killed my dreams by saying there's no way we're trading Bo Bichette.
Mm-hmm.
So if they don't want to cash in now, I would that seems to me like they're not that concerned about the leg.
All right, undervalued for me in the 100 to 200 range is Tommy Edman with an ADP of 190. And very simply, there's just no reason in my mind that he should be going 30 picks after Lane Thomas and Colton Cowser. And I get that these players are at different positions, but I think we're expecting a similar skill set. Luis Rengifo, Bryson Stott, Andres Jimenez are all going 20 to 25 picks ahead of Tommy Edman. And I expect a very similar skill set to all of those names that I just mentioned. Cowser is a little bit different. He's more of just like a power guy. Maybe he chips in a handful of steals, but just overall value, I don't think he should be going that much higher than Tommy Edman. In 37 games with the Dodgers, he hit 6 home runs with 6 steals, had that awesome postseason, hit over 300, 2 homers, 5 steals, won the NLCS MVP, and they gave him an extension this offseason. Mm-hmm. So as long as Edman is healthy, I think he's past that wrist issue. He's going to play every day. They need him to play every day. He's a great defender, and the Dodgers need that as well. I think he returns back to his 2022-23 form. 12 to 14 home runs, 30 steals, batting average that doesn't kill you, 260.
Great lineup.
Range. I think the problem is he could bat 9th in that lineup. There's also a chance that he bats 6th, 7th. And it's a pretty, stacked lineup. So yeah, I love this value here. 190. I feel like he should be a top 150 player right now.
Only thing I want to add, I don't understand why Lane Thomas is being drafted as high as he is. I know we're being positive. Lane Thomas is going like 70 spots ahead of Cedric Mullins right now. Like I genuinely don't understand what people see in Lane Thomas. That's all. That's my one thing. We can move on.
Okay. Wanted to give an honorable mention to Nick Castellanos. Another just kind of boring player, but he got off to a really slow start. And from May 29th on, he hit 284 with 17 home runs and 64 RBI. Last year, his ADP was 102. Now it's 175. So he feels like a pretty just kind of boring, get me my 25 home runs, 260 hitter, which, in a 5 outfielder league, I'll take some of those guys. So
an honorable mention for me is Brandon Nimmo, who is another one I have about 70 spots higher than the consensus. I don't know why he deserves to go so far behind Riley Green and Bryan Reynolds. I feel like it's a very similar profile, unless you're taking his 224 batting average last year at face value. But it's sort of like Bo Bichette, where it was a total outlier, and the underlying numbers don't really support that kind of decline. So I think he bounces back with batting average, and he's a base stealer now, 15 for 15 last year in that category. I think Nimmo's severely underrated.
All right, let's get into the 200 to 300 range in undervalued player. And Scott, right back to you.
All right. Carlos Correa is my choice here. He's going 256th on average, which is 136 spots lower than I have him, which is probably going to force me to move him down some. But I think it's silly because he was terrific last year. At this time last year, there were legitimate performance concerns for Carlos Correa, because it wasn't just that he couldn't stay healthy. He hit 230 with a 711 OPS in 2023. So it seemed like he was losing something skill wise, but bounced back last year with a 905 OPS in the 86 games he played, was a stud on a per game basis. I know we're doing roto rankings here, but by point per game average, I don't have it ready to go, so maybe I shouldn't have brought that up. But it was 3.33 points per game Carlos really Correa had last year. Yeah, it's comparable to, I don't think Trey Turner was that high, 3.33 last year. It was about the same.
That's about a top 40 player, probably.
Right. Per game basis, he did have the plantar fasciitis that limited him to just those 86 games. And of course, he has a history of injury, and he deserves to be downgraded some because of that. I thought I had downgraded him some because of that by ranking him only 120th. But it's clear from this early ADP that people just don't want anything to do with him. And it's a shame because he's still good.
He is, I think, based on talent and ability, I think clearly still a top 100 hitter. And probably that's underselling him, right? Like this was a 905 OPS last year. Full season rates, he's unlikely to play 162 games, but his rates last year, 26 homers, 100 RBI, 100 runs. Like he's a legitimate impact difference making type player. I get the injury concerns, but man, people just treat these guys like if they have injury concerns, you just can't draft them. And I don't get it. Like in these formats where you don't have IL spots, that hurts.
It's a little tougher, yeah.
But even then, when you're talking about like your 260th player, that's someone who's going to be on your bench pretty often anyway. Like you're not drafting must-start guys in this range. You might as well get a guy who, when he's active, you're going to feel very good about drafting. I've got Carlos Correa 202, so I don't know if I have him quite as high as Scott, but
you're
clearly ahead
lower.
of ADP. Yeah,
you're a downer.
If you look at the past 4 years for Correa, it's an 834 OPS or better in 3 of those. 2023 really stands out as the outlier bad season for Carlos Correa. So, it kind of reminds me of Brandon Lau, who again is kind of being buried in this range. And I considered choosing him as the undervalued player here because Brandon Lau's ADP is 250. You know he's going to miss time, but when he plays, he's still a not as good as Correa, but strong per game producer.
Correa's dropped about 2 rounds since last year, despite how good he was when he played last year.
Yeah,
it doesn't make
really
any
the
sense.
difference.
Yeah,
yeah, because that performance concern should be off the table now, and it's just the availability concern. Another shortstop who's being drafted in this range, surprisingly, is Tyler Fitzgerald, and he's almost who I picked here. 15 home runs, 17 steals in just 96 games last year, and expected to gain eligibility at second base early in the season, a weaker position. I wonder if it's just there are so many shortstops. Again, 15-team leagues with a middle infield spot, which is what these ADP numbers are mostly based on. I wouldn't think that would be a factor, but it is surprising to see all these interesting shortstops dropping this far down the rankings. Not that there aren't concerns about Tyler Fitzgerald. I was talking him down all of last season, but 250th overall. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Power speed guy, potentially.
Chris, over to you. Undervalued 200 to 300.
Yeah, Evan Carter, who was being drafted as a top 120 player a year ago. And I get he was bad last year, and I get that he suffered an injury, and there are concerns about both performance and injury and ability to stay healthy. But I don't think 45 games should dramatically change the way you view a player at this point in his career. He's 22 years old. He's still a supreme athlete. He still has a very good approach at the plate. There are questions about the power. There should have been questions about the power this time last year, too. I think the entire Rangers offense is likely to be much better in 2025 than it was in 2024. We're expecting the Semien bounce back, all of us. I think I expect pretty big bounce backs across the board in a lot of ways. So I understand being skeptical of Evan Carter. I understand being worried about drafting him as a starter. At 280, right? 278.4. You're barely drafting him as a starter at that point. So I think this is an overreaction to what effectively is a bad month and a half worth of games and an injury that I don't really have any reason to believe that this injury is just going to ruin Evan Carter's career. Like, it's not like he needed surgery. It's not like, it's some debilitating. It was a stress reaction in his back. So I think people are way overreacting. Evan Carter should be moved down the rankings, but I've got him inside the top 200, just barely. He's going almost 90 spots later than I'm drafting him.
3 interesting outfielders going in that same range between 275 and 290. Evan Carter, Willie Abreu, and Jordan Walker. How would you rank those 3?
Carter is clearly the most interesting for me. I don't really think Willie Abreu is all that interesting. I just don't know how much he's going to play.
Whoa.
So
What did Willie Abreu do to you?
Wasn't he a Gold Glove finalist?
Fine. I'm not.
Left-handed hitter. He'll play.
91.6 average exit velocity.
Yeah,
he's percent barrel rate. Come on, man.
Yeah, 15 homers, 8 stolen bases, and a 253 batting average. Like,
he's better than that.
Was anybody yelling at you if you didn't rank Leody Taveras as a top 200 player at this time last year? I think that's basically what Leody Taveras did in 2023, right?
Maybe. I
like
14 and 14
power and on base skills more than Taveras, but I mean, I rank Evan Carter higher, so it's kind of just playing devil's advocate here.
You just want to be seen disagreeing with me.
Of course, you're a disagreeable fellow.
All right. I think maybe one name that we will all agree on being undervalued is Spencer Arrighetti, who has an ADP of 219.4, and I totally get full season statistics are more predictive than partial season, but progress does exist for young players. And I think we saw a lot of progress from Arrighetti over his final 15 starts, a 3.31 ERA, 118 whip, 11 K per 9, 3.1 walks per 9. Early in the season, the walks were untenable. If we get 3 walks per 9 with that many strikeouts, that is very doable. That can work for Spencer Arrighetti, who has 3 pitches with a whiff rate over 37%. He's got a nasty curve, nasty sweeper. The fastball gets hit hard. I mean, that's something he needs to kind of work on in the offseason, but he's 96th percentile in extension. He has a great vertical approach angle. He's got good spin on the fastball. And just organizationally, he's on a good team. He should get run support. They're a really smart pitching organization. They did great work with Kikuchi, did great work with Hunter Brown and Arrighetti in season. So I think he's going to continue to get better. And right now at the ADP, he's going 30 picks after Taj Bradley, 40 picks.
Yeah, I just don't get that. Yeah.
40 picks after Brandon Pfaadt.
It's weird because we usually overrate the late season breakout. And like Taj Bradley had a similar stretch early on, but like from July on, Taj Bradley was pretty useless. Yep. So him going against Arrighetti, like I think the talent's pretty similar. I think Spencer Arrighetti might be closer to having figured it out than Taj Bradley. So yeah, I don't get that.
Yeah. 40 picks after Brandon Pfaadt and 50 picks after Shane Baz as well. I know Baz is a former top pitching prospect, but to me, these are all kind of young breakout hopeful pitchers, and some of them are going 50 picks apart. So,
and the thing with the Rays that you have to keep in mind, and this is something that there's been some really good research on. I think Baseball Prospectus had a really good piece recently about not just like the park factors of George Steinbrenner Field having less advantageous dimensions, but also just Tropicana Field led to a huge increase, not just in strikeouts, but like pitchers had much higher stuff plus ratings at Tropicana, both Rays pitchers and away pitchers. And so there was something about the environment of Tropicana Field that made pitchers stuff play up in a way that is almost certainly not going to happen in a very different environment. So I think downgrading the Rays as a whole makes sense. I would take Arrighetti ahead of Bradley for sure, and maybe Baz, honestly.
There have long been insinuations of Tropicana Field not having a very good what's it called? Back.
Yeah, hitter's eye. Willie Adames talked about
batter's
that.
eye. Yeah.
Willie Adames talked a lot about how he just could not see the ball at Tropicana Field.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys, we're kind of up against it here, but if you want to just rattle off a few other names, don't go too in depth on analysis, but any other names outside the top 300 that you think are undervalued right now?
So I managed to pick a pitcher for this stretch, Cody Bradford. He's going 341st on average. That's 104 spots lower than I have him. He had the 12th best walk rate among pitchers with 70 innings, high fly ball rate. So a low batting average against it led to that combination, the elite control and the high fly ball rate led to a 101 whip and more than 8K per nine. So it's a very similar profile for Cody Bradford as like Bryce Miller and Bailey Ober and Shota Imanaga. It's one that can work in fantasy. Some ERA risk, but the whip could be elite. And there's enough strikeouts. And I don't think he needs to be drafted alongside those guys. But I am excited in a general sense for Cody Bradford. And there's no way I'd let a draft end this year with him still on the table.
Chris?
A guy who's going almost as late as Cody Bradford, who I think we would all agree is more talented, Jesus Luzardo, whose ADP is 447 as the 327th player off the board. Last year, his ADP was 86.9. And I was out on Luzardo at that price. I thought there was injury risk that wasn't being accounted for. I thought there was performance risk. He's a guy who, like, the difference between how good Jesus Luzardo is when he throws 95 and when he throws 96 is really big. And so I was skeptical of him there. I understand being skeptical of him now, but it's a guy who, when he's been healthy the past couple of years, has been a true must-start pitcher. The Cubs are apparently in on him, so he should get a better team.
Yeah.
I will gladly take Jesus Luzardo on my bench. Yes.
I have no idea if he will stay healthy. He's been on the IL multiple times with forearm, elbow stuff. He was shut down last year with a lumbar stress reaction in his back. This is the exact late round flyer you want to take a shot on. Someone who you know has big upside. His 50 starts with the Marlins the 2 years prior, 3.48 ERA, 115 whip, 10.6 K per nine, 14% swinging strike rate. So that's SP2 upside for fantasy. And you're getting him outside of the top 400 picks right now. So, and he's going to get traded. Like I feel pretty confident in that. you'll see a big bump in ADP once he winds up on a better team. I do believe that for Luzardo as well. For me, just wanted to give a shout out to Jose Soriano. He was another reliever turned starter who fared very well last season. 3.42 ERA, 120 WHIP, 60% ground ball rate, was third highest among pitchers with 110 innings. Too many walks, not enough strikeouts. I think there is more strikeout potential here, though. He throws very hard. He has a curveball with a 40% whiff rate and had a 14.8% swinging strike rate as a reliever in 2023. I don't think he gets all the way back there, but can he bump his swinging strike rate up to 11, 12%? And he's like an 8K per nine, 8.5K per nine kind of guy. If he does that, then yeah, I think he could be a pretty valuable pitcher, and obviously going extremely late right now. Just wanted to give some honorable mentions. Kyle Manzardo hit really well when he returned last season.
Yep.
Progressive Field plays up for left-handed power again. I think we can get 25 home runs from him.
He was on my list.
Andy Pages, if the Dodgers don't sign another outfielder, I think is pretty interesting. Jonathan Aranda, Scott, I'm with you. Give this guy a chance to play in Yankee Stadium South, please, because I think big things can happen. And Joey Cantillo, just kind of intrigued. He has 2 pitches with a whiff rate over 42%, a lead extension, and the Guardians do really well with pitching development. I don't know if he's going to start. I don't know what his role is, but some interesting skills there. So just wanted to mention the name. Anyone else?
Well, we didn't mention Jurickson Profar. Not that he's in this beyond 300 range. He's going 211th, but that's like 90 spots lower than I'm drafting him.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I agree with that one. And I don't know. There's a lot of them. I don't want to go through them all. There's too many names to mention.
If you want to find them out, subscribe to the newsletter and read Chris's work. We are going to wrap there for Scott and Chris. I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball Today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back again next week. Bye-bye.